Arab executive sees poor African girl sleeping in trash. Her story leaves him in shock. He stepped out of his luxury car, expecting just another business trip. But then, under a broken streetlight, his eyes locked onto a sight that would haunt him forever. A little girl, barefoot and trembling, curled up in a pile of garbage like she belonged there. Her skin was covered in dirt, her tiny body hidden beneath an oversized shirt. And yet, when she looked up at him, her eyes held something powerful. Not fear, not even shame, just silence. And that silence would change his life forever. What happened next would expose secrets, tear open old wounds, and force one of the richest men in the Middle East to confront a part of himself he had long buried. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. That way, you'll never miss a story that touches the heart and reveals the truth behind the unthinkable. Zaid al-Rashid was used to stepping out of bulletproof vehicles into five-star lobbies. The air that usually greeted him smelled of imported colognes, chilled champagne, and ambition. But this time, as he opened the door of his custom black Mercedes Maybach, the first thing he smelled was smoke and something far worse: rotting waste. He was in Kamsa, a city on the outskirts of Nairobi, Kenya, scouting locations for a new Pan-African logistics hub. His advisors had insisted he stay within the presidential district, but Zaid had insisted otherwise. "Show me the real place," he had told them, "the one without golden gates and pre-polished smiles." He hadn't shaved that morning. His linen shirt, though expensive, was wrinkled from a flight. His leather shoes tapped softly against broken pavement. His driver waited in the idling car as he took slow steps into the alley behind an abandoned textile factory, curious about the haunting quiet. That's when he saw her. At first, he thought it was a bundle of discarded fabric. The girl was curled against a rusted dumpster, nearly camouflaged in rags. Her knees hugged her chest. A plastic bag covered her head, not to breathe, but to shield her from the wind. Zaid blinked. Then the bundle moved. A small, thin arm reached out to scratch an insect bite on her leg. Her skin, deep and warm brown, was marred with dust and bruises. When the bag slipped slightly, it revealed wild, uncombed hair and a delicate face beneath it, too delicate for the streets. She was no older than 7. Zaid stood frozen. His chest, usually armored with indifference, tightened. He had seen poverty before, in Syria, in Sudan, even in his own country, hidden under a veil of marble and oil wealth. But this was different. This was a child, alone, sleeping in trash. He crouched down slowly, unsure if she was asleep or simply pretending. "Assalamu alaikum," he whispered. His voice, though gentle, echoed in the alley. The girl flinched. Her eyes opened. For a moment, they stared at each other. And in that moment, everything inside Zaid shifted. Her eyes were large, framed by long lashes clumped with dirt. But they weren't empty. They weren't desperate. They were alert, studying him, testing him, as if to ask, "Are you like the others?" Zaid had never felt smaller. He, the man who negotiated billion-dollar oil contracts with heads of state, couldn't find a single word to say to a homeless child. "My name is Zaid," he managed. "Are you hurt?" The girl didn't answer. She pulled the plastic bag back over her face and tucked herself tighter against the wall. That should have been the end of it. Zaid could have walked away, driven back to his hotel, called UNICEF, written a check to some local charity, and flown home feeling noble. But he didn't move. Minutes passed. His driver finally stepped out and said, "Sir, is everything all right?" Zaid didn't look away from her. "No, everything is not all right." He reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and took a photo of the alley, the dumpster, the wall, the tiny silhouette beneath it. Not to post, not to share, just so he'd never forget. "Find the nearest children's shelter," he said. "There is one, but..." The driver hesitated. "It's underfunded. Corrupt, I hear." Zaid's jaw clenched. "Bring me the name. I'll see it myself." The girl hadn't moved again. She was pretending he wasn't real, or hoping he'd go away. But he wasn't going anywhere. Half an hour later, Zaid stood in front of a crumbling building with faded blue paint, and the words "Hope Light Center" peeling above the gate. Inside, a thin woman in her 50s greeted him with suspicion. She wore a church necklace and had the tired look of someone who'd fought too many wars with too little help. He asked about the girl. The woman shook her head. We see many like her. They come. They go. Some don't make it. Most have no names. She has eyes like soldiers. Zaid said. The woman frowned. Then she seen something no child should. That night, Zaid returned to the alley. She was gone. He panicked. He searched both sides of the street, checked under stairwells, behind fences. He asked locals in shops if they'd seen her. Nobody had. They looked past him, ignored him. As he was about to give up, he heard something. Not a voice. A sound, like humming. He followed it past a heap of tin cans, and there she was, sitting behind a burned mattress, drawing lines in the dirt with a stick. She didn't look at him this time. She just said, "Are you hungry?" Zaid blinked. "What?" The girl tapped her chest. "I am, but I asked if you are." He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Yes, I'm starving." She pointed to a piece of bread next to her, clearly days old. "You can have it. I already imagined eating it." He crouched beside her, his designer pants brushing the filth. "What's your name?" She didn't answer. "You don't trust me." She shrugged. He reached into his pocket again and handed her something. Not money, not food. A folded piece of paper. On it, a drawing. A small girl standing beneath a tree, and beside her, a tall man holding an umbrella over her head. Her eyes studied it, then flicked to him. "Did you draw this?" He nodded. "I used to draw when I was scared. I thought maybe it would help." She took the paper and clutched it. "You're strange." "I get that a lot." A long silence. Finally, she whispered, "My name is Imani." Zaid felt a name strike his chest like thunder. It meant faith in Swahili. He looked up at the night sky, then down at the child who had just given him more than any $1 million deal ever had. He knew, in that instant, that his trip to Kamsa had nothing to do with logistics or contracts or trade. It had everything to do with her. And he had just taken the first step into a story that would destroy his past, test his soul, and rebuild everything he believed in. Zaid didn't sleep that night. He returned to a hotel, a luxury oasis built for foreign dignitaries and CEOs like him. Marble floors, gold faucets, soundproof windows. But none of it mattered. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her, Imani, huddled behind that burnt mattress, offering him stale bread with the generosity of a queen. At dawn, he canceled his scheduled meetings. His assistant, Khalid, called 3 times. Zaid ignored all of them. He sat in the leather armchair by the window, suit jacket folded across the armrest. The drawing of Imani had kept still burned into his mind. She had told him her name. That was something. But now came the harder question. What was he supposed to do with it? At 10 a.m., he went back to the alley. She wasn't there. His heart dropped. Again. But he was learning quickly. Imani didn't stay in one place for long. She moved with the shadows. So he walked, asked quietly around, offered money without showing it, until a boy, maybe 10 years old, pointed him toward the train tracks near the edge of the slum. She picks metal there. The boy said, sometimes fights with others for it. Zaid's stomach twisted. He followed the boy's directions. The tracks were silent. The trains long gone. In their place were piles of scrap, old boats, mangled aluminum, the currency of the forgotten. And there she was, kneeling in the dirt, dragging a twisted piece of copper out of a pile of trash. He approached slowly. You could have waited for me. She looked up. Sweat covered her brow. You didn't say you were coming back. I thought it was obvious. Nothing is obvious here. Zaid knelt beside her. I want to help. She stopped working and stared at him. They all say that. Who does? People, foreigners, men in white shirts. They give you food one day, then you never see them again. Zaid's breath caught. He had nothing to say, because she was right. But he didn't leave. He watched her fill a dirty rice bag with the scraps she had found. The bag dragged behind her as she walked barefoot through broken glass. He followed her through tight alleyways, over puddles of rainwater that smelled of rot, past stray dogs and shouting vendors, until she reached a small junkyard. A man with an oily beard took the bag, without a word, and handed her a few coins. She stuffed them in a plastic bottle she kept under her shirt. "That's it?" Zaid asked. She nodded. "Enough for a bun. Maybe milk if I don't eat tomorrow." He couldn't take it anymore. "Come with me," he said. "I can give you a place to sleep. Food. A real bed." But she stepped back. Her expression hardened. "I don't go with men." Zaid's heart cracked. "I didn't mean it like that." Imani didn't blink. "They always say that, too." He put his hands up. "Okay, I understand. But you don't have to go anywhere. Just meet someone. Someone I trust." "Who?" "The woman from the shelter. Hope Light. You'll be safe there." Imani hesitated. "They hit kids." "Not anymore," Zaid said. "Not if I'm watching." She raised an eyebrow. "You're going to live there?" "No, but I'll be checking. Every day if I have to." She didn't answer, but she didn't walk away. He took that as a yes. That afternoon, Zaid returned to Hope Light with Imani walking 5 paces behind him, arms crossed, face unreadable. The woman at the gate, Sister Miriam, looked surprised to see her. Zaid pulled her aside. "I want her protected. Federal, given a real bed, and a uniform for school." "Mr. Arashid," she said carefully, "we appreciate your generosity, but our resources are limited, and—" "I'm not asking," he interrupted. "I'm funding it, starting with her." She studied his face, then looked at Imani. "Her name?" "Imani," he said. "She told me." Sister Miriam nodded. "Then she is brave." But Imani didn't enter right away. She stood at the edge of the doorway, staring at the cracked concrete and rows of bunks. Then she turned and looked at Zaid. "You'll leave too?" He shook his head. "Not unless you tell me to." It wasn't trust. Not yet, but it was a beginning. For the next 3 days, Zaid visited Hope Light each morning. Imani never smiled, never ran to him, but she never hid either. She started eating real food. Rice, beans, once even mango. Zaid watched from afar as she stared at a toothbrush like it was made of gold. Sister Miriam said Imani refused to sleep on the bed the first night. She lay on the floor. "Too soft," she whispered. Zaid stayed in Kamsa longer than planned. He canceled his return to Abu Dhabi, postponed his board meetings. The man who never took more than 72 hours away from his empire was now spending afternoons watching an 8-year-old girl learn how to read basic Swahili syllables on a chalkboard. Kala was furious. "Sir, you have a $90 million contract to sign. You're risking your image." "I already have an image," Zaid replied. "I want a soul." But on the 4th day, something went wrong. He arrived at Hope Light and found Sister Miriam outside, pale and shaken. "What happened?" She ran away. Zaid froze. "What?" She had a nightmare, screamed, pushed another girl, then vanished. Panic surged through him. He drove himself. Alone, no guards, no driver. He checked every corner of the slum, every alley, every burned mattress. Nothing. By sunset, he was back at the train tracks, heart pounding. And then he heard it again. That humming. Soft, barely there, but real. He followed it, past a collapsed fence, around a pile of tires. And there she was, sitting in the dirt, hugging the rice bag filled with coins. "I thought you said you trusted me," he said. She didn't look at him. "I had a dream." "Tell me?" She whispered. "In the dream, I was inside a golden room. There was food, a bed, and someone hugged me." He waited. "Then the door closed," she said, "and I was back in the trash." Zaid sat down beside her. "That wasn't a dream. That was your memory." She finally looked up. "I was in a place before, a nice one, with a man and a woman. But then they left. I woke up on the street." Zaid's throat tightened. "Do you remember their names?" She shook her head. "Do you want to find them?" "No," she said. "I want to stop waiting for them." Zaid felt something inside him shatter. He reached into his coat and pulled out a new drawing. This one showed a girl on a boat, with the sun rising behind her and a lighthouse in the distance. He handed it to her. She held it for a long time. Then, softly, "Okay. Okay, what?" "I'll go back." He nodded. "But," she added, "only if you come tomorrow, too." Zaid smiled. "I promise." But he had no idea how far this promise would take him, or how one child would change everything he believed about his family, his empire, and the very blood that ran in his veins. Zaid arrived earlier than usual. It was barely 6:30 a.m., and the slums of Kamsa were still wrapped in a gray haze. Smoke rose lazily from open fires. The streets were quieter, the noise of survival not yet in full swing. He stood at the rusted gate of Hoplite, holding a small canvas bag in his hand. Inside it, wrapped carefully in silk, was a gift. The night before, he had spoken to his mother in Abu Dhabi for the first time in weeks. "You sound different," she said. "I met a girl," he replied. There was silence. Then, "You mean a woman?" "No, a girl. 8, maybe 9. Homeless. She sees through people, Amy." Another pause. Then a whisper. "Be careful, Zaid. The world breaks people like her. And sometimes it breaks those who try to save them, too." He hadn't slept since. Now, standing in the early morning fog, he wasn't thinking about empires or caution. He was thinking about Imani. The gate creaked open. She was already awake, sitting under the jacaranda tree in the courtyard, drawing with a stick in the dirt again. When she saw him, she didn't smile, but she didn't frown either. It was progress. "I brought something for you," he said, kneeling. She eyed the bag. "It's not food, is it?" "I already ate." He chuckled. "No, it's something else." She didn't move, so he slowly unwrapped the silk, revealing a small wooden box. Inside, a necklace. It wasn't gold. Zaid knew better than to give her something flashy. Instead, it was a carved sandalwood pendant, shaped like a tiny bird in flight, attached to a leather cord. "I had it made," he said. "You're the first person I've ever given a gift like this." She stared at it. "Why a bird?" "Because they're never really lost," he said. "They just fly in circles until they remember where home is." Imani reached out and touched it gently. Then, slowly, she put it around her neck. She didn't say thank you. She just whispered, "Do you want to see something?" Zaid followed her into one of the smaller storage rooms, past the worn bunk beds and chipped tiles. She pushed open a creaky wooden cabinet and pulled out a cloth bag, heavy and stained. Inside were dozens of torn papers. "They were in a fire," she said. "I found them near the dump." Zaid picked one up, part of a birth certificate. The name was half burned, but it showed the year, 2016. Another one, a medical slip, then a crayon drawing, a tiny footprint. "Where did you get these?" Imani shrugged. "They were together. I thought maybe they're mine." Zaid's heart stopped. "What?" "I don't remember much," she said. "But sometimes I dream of blue walls, a baby crying, a woman who sang while cooking." Zaid sifted through the documents, eyes scanning every line. He stopped on one fragment. It had a hospital stamp from Al Noor Medical Center in Sharjah, UAE. He froze. Sharjah was a 20-minute drive from his childhood home, from the palace his family owned, from the private hospital his cousin once ran. "Imani," he said slowly, "do you remember anything else about the woman in your dreams?" "Only her voice," she said. "She said Habibdi a lot. That's not Swahili, right?" "No," he whispered. "It's Arabic. It means my darling." Something cracked inside his chest. Zaid suddenly remembered a conversation, one from 10 years ago, when his cousin Yasser, a reckless surgeon in Sharjah, had confessed during a drunken Eid gathering. "We had a case once, a baby smuggled in, no record, no family, no visa. She disappeared the night after a fire broke out in the pediatric wing. No one ever followed up." At the time, Zaid thought it was just gossip, but now he turned to Imani. "I need to take these papers. Is that okay?" She nodded. "I have them memorized." Back at the hotel, Zaid contacted a private investigator in Dubai. Within hours, records started surfacing: redacted files, internal hospital reports, vague mentions of an unclaimed minor who was later declared missing after a fire. No DNA, no fingerprints, just one photo, burnt edges, a newborn wrapped in a red blanket, a bracelet on her wrist with name, Lena. Zaid zoomed in on the image. His hands trembled. The bracelet had the same bird symbol he had given Imani that morning. Coincidence? He didn't believe in those anymore. He returned to the shelter at dusk. Imani was playing jacks with a group of younger children. She looked lighter. Not happy, but less haunted. He pulled Sister Miriam aside. "There's something you should know," he said, showing her the documents in the photo. "This girl, she might not be Kenyan. She might have been taken from the UAE. Sister Miriam looked stunned. "But how would she end up here?" "I don't know," Zaid said. "Human trafficking? Abandonment? Someone covering something up." She crossed herself. "What will you do?" "I want to take her to Dubai. Privately. Quietly. If there's a family out there looking for her." "You think she belongs to them?" Zaid shook his head. "I don't know, but she deserves the truth." Later that night, Zaid sat with Imani under the same jacaranda tree. He showed her the photo. She stared at it for a long time. "I know that bracelet," she said. "I used to dream of it." "That's you," he said gently. "I think your real name might be Lena." She held the photo to her chest. "Lena," she repeated. It sounded like flying. Zaid smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes, because the truth was no longer simple. If this girl was from Sharjah, if she had been taken, then someone had gone through a lot of effort to erase her. And Zaid had just disturbed that silence. He booked 2 seats on a private jet for the next morning. Destination, Dubai. He didn't know what waited there. But something in his soul told him this wasn't the end of her story. It was the beginning of his. The jet touched down in Dubai just after 2 a.m. From the window, Imani stared wide-eyed at the sea of lights, the golden minarets, the desert beyond. She clutched the bird pendant around her neck, twisting it anxiously. Zaid had sat beside her the whole flight, answering her questions with soft patience, never pushing too far. "Is this where I'm from?" she asked. "I think so," he said. "But we're here to find out." Zaid hadn't stepped foot in Dubai in nearly a year. Not since the merger war between his logistics empire and the Al Khalifa Group. His return wasn't exactly celebrated, especially not by his family, which was why, at that hour, he didn't go home. He went to the Al Noor Private Medical Archives, using a code his cousin Yasser had once given him, back when family secrets were told over whiskey and firelight. The building was quiet, its security old-fashioned. He made a call. Within minutes, a tired clerk in his 50s arrived, bribed and bleary-eyed. "I only need one thing," Zaid said. "The night of the fire. Pediatric wing. 2016. The man disappeared into the records room and returned 20 minutes later with a thick envelope. Inside were photos, nurse log, reports, and a single sheet marked "Confidential. Internal review." It listed a patient. Unnamed female infant. Admitted July 19, 2016. ID bracelet. Number 7049. Notes. Unknown parentage. Found at mosque entrance. No injuries. No identification. No DNA profile. Labeled Lena by nursery staff. Final note. Status. Missing. Presumed deceased after fire evacuation failure. No further investigation. File closed August 3rd, 2016. Zaid closed the file, his hands shaking. "Why would they close it?" he muttered. "Because the hospital was in debt." The clerk said flatly. "They didn't want scandal. Losing a baby was easier to bury." Zaid stared at the man. "Did you just hear what you said?" The clerk shrugged. "The city moves fast. Some stories don't survive." Zaid walked out, heart pounding. Imani followed quietly, hugging the file against her chest. Outside, the desert air was cool. "Is it me?" she asked. "Am I Lena?" Zaid nodded. "I believe so. But no one ever came for me." He paused. "That doesn't mean no one cared." They drove in silence. Instead of returning to his villa, Zaid brought Imani to an apartment he kept in the marina, one no one knew about. It had white floors, wide windows, and a view of the Gulf that looked like a painting. Imani stood at the glass wall, transfixed. "I never saw water that big," she whispered. Zaid stood behind her. "You'll see bigger. You'll see the world." But inside, a storm was brewing, because Zaid knew what he had to do next. A DNA test. He had already called his private physician. The kit would arrive by morning. Still, he didn't sleep. He paced the apartment, looking through old files, family photos. He thought about his mother, his uncles, his late father, a man obsessed with lineage and bloodlines. What would they say if he brought home a girl from the street and said, "This is one of us"? Would they laugh? Or worse, would they try to hide her again? At dawn, the doctor arrived. Imani barely flinched as he swabbed her cheek. She was too calm. "You've done this before?" Zaid asked. She nodded. "Once. In Kenya. A man wanted to know if I was his." "Were you?" "No," she said. He left before the results came. Zaid's chest ached. This time he stayed, held her hand. The doctor promised results within 24 hours. While they waited, Zaid took her around the city. He bought her a pair of shoes, simple white sneakers, and watched her run for the first time. He took her to the top of Burj Khalifa, where she stared down at the world in stunned silence. They ate shawarma near the creek and fed birds at the Jumeirah beach. And slowly, she began to laugh. Not often, not loud, but real. He began calling her Lena. She didn't protest. But the truth was closing in fast. That night, Zaid dreamed of fire, of a baby crying, of smoke filling the nursery, and a nurse whispering, "She's gone, sir. There's no way she made it." He woke covered in sweat. At 9:12 a.m., the doctor called. "It's her," he said. Zaid's heart stopped. "What?" "She's your cousin's child. Bloodlines match. Yasser, he's her biological father." Zaid sat down hard. Yasser, the same man who had once whispered about a lost child. The same man who had died in a car crash 2 years ago with his new fiancée. No one had ever spoken of a daughter, but here she was, alive, forgotten, and now found. Zaid hung up the phone and stared at the wall. Imani, Lena, was not just a girl. She was family, but that truth came with a price. The Al-Rashid family would not welcome her, not without a fight. And deep down, Zaid feared they might try to erase her again, like they did before. At dinner, Lena noticed his silence. "You found something, didn't you?" Zaid looked at her. "You were born here, in Sharjah. Your father's name was Yasser." She blinked. "Is he alive?" Zaid hesitated. "No, he died in an accident." She looked down, then whispered, "So I'm alone again." "No," Zaid said, voice breaking. "Not anymore." He knelt beside her chair. "I don't care what blood says, or what papers say. I'm not leaving you. Ever." She nodded slowly, then wrapped her arms around his neck. It was the first time she touched him without fear. He held her tightly, and in that moment he knew she wasn't a burden. She wasn't a secret. She was his responsibility. But he also knew the family would come for him, for her, for the silence, and he would have to make a choice between his legacy and her life. Zaid parked his car 2 blocks away from the Al-Rashid estate. It was early evening, the sky still burning orange above the domes of Sharjah, casting a soft glow on the limestone walls that surrounded his family's legacy. The villa had not changed: tall iron gates, manicured gardens, the fountain with the carved falcons that once mesmerized him as a boy. He used to ride his bike in that courtyard. He used to believe this place was sacred. Now, it felt like a cage wrapped in gold. He had called ahead, not to ask for permission, but to make a statement. "I'm coming. I'm bringing someone with me, and I expect you all to listen." At his side, Lena held his hand. She wore a simple sky blue dress and the bird pendant. Her hair was neatly braided now, her face calm, but her grip was tight. She knew something was coming. She just didn't know what. As they approached the gate, a guard stepped forward. "Sir, you cannot enter." Zayd didn't stop walking. "Tell the sheik his nephew is here with the only surviving blood of his dead son. And if he wants this to remain a private matter, he'll open the gate." The man hesitated, his radio buzzing. Then, slowly the gates opened. Inside, they were met by silence. Not the warm silence of reverence, but the cold, heavy hush of tension. In the grand salon, under the crystal chandelier, 3 people waited. Sheikh Ahmed al-Rashid, the patriarch. Zayd's uncle, the man who had built the family empire after oil. A face carved from stone, with a voice that once made ministers tremble. Miriam, Zayd's aunt, elegant, controlled, her expression unreadable. And finally, Kareem, Zayd's cousin and legal head of the family trust. The moment Zayd and Lena entered, the room froze. No one greeted them. No one offered water. Zayd didn't wait for pleasantries. "This is Lena," he said. "She is Yasser's daughter. She was left for dead in a hospital fire, and she's very much alive." Kareem scoffed. "That's not possible." "I have the DNA test," Zayd replied. "Conducted yesterday. Verified by our family physician." He pulled the envelope from his coat and handed it to Ahmed. The old man didn't take it. "You think walking in here with a child and a piece of paper give you authority?" Ahmed said quietly. "I'm not here to beg," Zayd said. "I'm here to expose what was buried." Miriam finally spoke. "You're accusing us of what exactly?" "Of knowing," Zayd said, "of knowing that she existed. That Yasser had a daughter, and that after the fire, instead of looking for her, you let the file disappear. Because a child born outside marriage would ruin his engagement, his political future, your future." Silence. Lena looked up at Zayd, confused. Ahmed's eyes narrowed. "Your tongue has grown reckless, nephew." "My conscience has grown stronger," Zayd replied. Kareem stepped forward. "Even if this were true, and that's a generous assumption, what do you want? Money? Custody? To parade her in the media and shame us all?" Zayd's jaw clenched. "I want her name back. Her story. I want her protected. Recognized." "You want her to inherit?" Miriam said sharply. Zayd met her gaze. "She's the only blood left of your son. And a product of sin." Ahmed snapped. "You dare walk into this house and—" "I dare," Zayd interrupted, voice rising, "because you raised me to believe in justice, in family, and now that the truth is ugly, you want silence." Ahmed stood slowly. He crossed the marble floor and looked directly at Lena. She didn't flinch. She looked right back. Then quietly she said, "I don't need your money or your name. I just want to stop hiding." Something in the room cracked. It wasn't the chandelier or the air conditioning. It was something deeper. A silence broken by the truth spoken from a child who had slept in trash while they dined in palaces. Ahmed turned to Zayd. "You have until the end of the week to leave Dubai," he said, "with or without the girl. If you stay, I will cut you from the trust, from every company, every account. You will become a ghost." Zayd didn't blink. "I've been one my whole life." He turned to Lena. "Let's go." As they reached the door, Miriam spoke softly. "Zayd." He stopped. Her eyes, for a moment, held something human. "There was a photo," she whispered, "of her, on Yasser's desk. He hid it in his drawer. I saw it once." Zayd stared at her. "You knew," he said. She nodded. "I couldn't save her. I didn't have the power." "You do now." "No," she said, "but you do." Outside, Zayd drove in silence. Lena didn't ask questions. She just held his hand. Only when they reached the Marina apartment did she speak. "I saw his eyes," she said. "The old man. He looked at me like I was dirty. You're not." "I know, but it still hurts." Zayd sat on the couch, exhausted. "Why did you fight for me?" she asked. He looked at her. "Because you fought first." She crawled into his lap, resting her head on his chest. "Am I really worth losing everything?" He kissed the top of her head. "You're worth becoming everything." That night, he wrote a letter. To the press, to the world, not to expose, but to tell her story, anonymously. He told a child lost in a system of silence and survival, of rediscovery. He ended it with a line. Sometimes, the truest family is the one that chooses you when no one else will. And he signed it. ZR, former prince, now father. What Zaid didn't know was that this letter would leak, that it would go viral, that people across the Middle East, Europe, and Africa would share it. That Lena's story would awaken a movement of children forgotten by power. But what he didn't know was this. His life had changed, forever, and so had hers. The article wasn't meant to spread. Zaid had asked for confidentiality, a soft piece, a whisper, not a war cry. But within 48 hours, it had reached millions, translated into French, English, Arabic, Swahili. Blogs reposted it. NGOs quoted it. Advocacy networks for missing children around the world lit up. The title became a movement. The girl in the garbage who changed a kingdom. And people wanted to know who she was. Zaid received hundreds of messages, some offering help, others begging for her identity. A few threatened lawsuits. A handful threatened worse. The family, of course, panicked. A representative from the Al Rashid Legal Board contacted him urgently. "You've created a storm," the voice said coldly. "The board is meeting. You've jeopardized partnerships, reputations." Zaid replied simply, "Your silence did that. I just held up a mirror." Then he hung up. That same day, Lena was invited to appear, anonymously, on a BBC radio interview. Zaid declined, but he read her every letter that arrived. One came from a girl in Lebanon who had escaped child trafficking. Another from a boy in Senegal who said, "You're braver than any superhero." And yet, the danger wasn't over. One evening, as Zaid and Lena were walking near the Dubai Marina, a black SUV blocked their path. 3 men stepped out. They didn't wear uniforms. They didn't need to. "You should leave the country, sir," one of them said, his voice stiff. "For your safety. And hers." Zaid didn't flinch. "If anything happens to us, the entire world will know exactly who to blame." The men didn't reply. They just nodded once, got back in, and drove away. Zaid turned to Lena. She didn't cry. She didn't panic. She just said, "You were right. They want me quiet." "No," Zaid said, taking her hand. "They want us quiet. And they'll never get that." By week's end, Zaid received a formal notice. He had been removed from the Al Rashid Trust, frozen out of accounts, erased from all board-level decisions. It was done. His name was no longer printed on the pillars of power his ancestors built. And for the first time in his adult life, Zaid felt free. He sold the Marina apartment, liquidated his remaining assets outside the family trust, opened a new account in London under a new company, Lena Foundation for Displaced Children. Then he packed 2 bags, booked 2 tickets, and told Lena, "We're starting over." She blinked. Wherever we're needed. They began in Kenya, returned quietly, visited Hopelight. Sister Miriam cried when she saw Lena walk through the gate, healthy and unafraid. Then they traveled to Cairo, then Istanbul, then Marseille. Each stop, they visited shelters, foster homes, orphanages. Zaid didn't show his face to cameras, but Lena did, always on her terms. By the time she turned 10, she had become a symbol, not a celebrity, a reminder that forgotten children carry stories, not shame, and that no empire should be built on their silence. One rainy night in London, after a long day at a refugee center, Zaid stood at the kitchen counter of their small apartment. He was preparing dinner when he noticed Lena drawing at the table. "What are you working on?" he asked. She smiled and turned the paper around. It was a sketch of the old Al Rashid mansion, but it had no walls, no gates, and above it a flock of birds flying free. "It's what it would look like," she said, "if it was safe for people like me." Zaid looked at her, truly looked, and something inside him welled up. "I want to adopt you," he said. She froze. He added quickly, "Only if you want that. You don't need to change your name. You don't owe me anything. But I love you, Lena. I love you more than I ever thought I could love anyone. She stood up, walked to him, and whispered, "You already did, a long time ago." Epilogue: one letter, one girl, one man. Years later, a journalist would write a feature titled, "From Power to Purpose," the executive who lost an empire and gained a daughter. It would describe how Zaid al-Rashid gave up billions not to become a saint, but to become a man who could look a child in the eye and say, "I stayed." It would describe Lena, now a young activist, polyglot, and founder of a legal aid network for undocumented minors, as the girl who made the powerful remember their humanity. And it would close with a quote from Lena herself. "When I was little, I slept in garbage. I thought that was my story. But now I know that was just the beginning. My real story started when someone saw me and didn't walk away.